GM, and welcome to the Non-Fungible Creator Show. This is your host, Non-Fungible TC, Non-Fungible Today, and Non-Fungible Tomorrow. And this is part of the Web Radio Decentralized Media Network. And in this episode, we are really excited to have Jenn, Marketing Director of Paraspace, on the show. But actually, prior to her Web3 role, she was a VR native creator and has been creating content, like VR content, since 2016. So today it's really exciting to have Jenn. She'll be sharing her journey as a VR content creator, how she transitioned into the Web3 space, and how she's also building a community in Paraspace as well. So GM Jenn, how are you?
GM, I am good. I'm still catching up on some sleep, but it's really great to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. And, I know I said this before, but thank you for thinking that my story is interesting enough to share it. It really does mean a lot.
Thank you, Jenn. The reason why we are having this interview or this show right now is that I reached out to you guys at Paraspace. I saw you guys were actually recently hacked by a white hat hacker. It turned out positive in the end, but I was like, oh, it would be so cool to interview someone from the team. And then you were like, oh, I should interview you and Yubo, who's the founder of Paraspace. And then I started looking into your bio. Like usually what I do research on everyone I bring up to the show. And now I was like, wow, you have a very impressive background before entering the Web3 space. Why don't we have you share, what were you doing before Web3?
Oh gosh. So basically for many, many years before Web3, I was a VR director and producer. And it's really funny and a particularly interesting journey for me. To give you guys like some context, I graduated from high school in 2014. So I was very young in the space, and basically in my first year of college decided to drop out to go create VR full time. And a huge driver around that was, well, number one, when I was in high school and in college, it was very bullish on, I'm gonna go make movies, I'm gonna go direct television, I'm gonna go direct commercials. Like that's the career trajectory that I wanted to be on. And a few friends of mine were like, hey, Jenn, have you heard about VR? And I was like, what is that? That sounds stupid. Why would anyone put on a headset to experience a story? That's so dumb. That's so silly. And I just completely just shut it down. I was very focused on what we consider flatties, like traditional flat experiences and storytelling. And then, I kept seeing it pop up. And ultimately, I saw the Facebook acquisition of Oculus. And I was like, okay, this is a $2 billion acquisition. All my friends keep talking about it. I got to go figure out what this is. And so I went to VR LA, which is one of I guess it used to be one of the biggest conferences for VR, but this is one of the very first ones. And it was still small. And it was literally just one convention room in a hotel. And started walking around the booths, and I sat down and I put on a headset for the first time. And I'll never forget this experience. It was a piece created by this woman named Rose Troche, who is a Sundance award-winning director and a queer woman, which is incredible and really resonates with my story. But essentially, she created this immersive experience talking about date rape. And you experienced it both from the female perspective and male perspective. And let me tell you, being in a headset where everything was 3D and in your face, and you were it literally felt like you were in the shoes of, each character. It was so powerful. And I remember taking the headset off and I was like, oh, I get it. I see. And literally within 2 weeks from that experience, I dropped out of college. I went and found a VR production studio in Los Angeles that I had, through mutual friends I had a contact with. And I was basically like, hi, I'm a fast learner. I'm self-taught in Photoshop, Premiere, Illustrator, all of these things. I think what you guys are doing is really cool. You need to hire me and I will be the best intern you've ever had. Also, you need to pay me. And for some reason, magically, oh God, 19-year-old me coming in hot. But they took a bet on me and they brought me on as an intern. And I spent about 3 months there learning more about the tech. We were taking cameras apart, putting them back together, ordering custom lenses from Asia to come in to modify these GoPro cameras. But like TLDR, like that's kind of how I got started. And once I took that internship, it was just everything changed from that moment forward for me, really.
To be honest, you are actually quite early at your time, right? Because it was 2016 and you were exploring something related to the metaverse already and creating content back then. So were there any challenges back then? Because like, say for example, last year, right, everyone was talking about the metaverse, and then we already see a lot of challenges. Oh, virtual headsets, haptic stuff like that. So were there any challenges back then in 2016?
Oh my God, there were so many challenges. So I started my internship in like 2015, and like in 2016, I feel like I was probably considered one of the more advanced and experienced creators within the space, especially for real-time content. Real-time as in like we actually recorded it, and not real-time in the sense of a game engine, but like you have to understand, like in 2015, 2016, the headsets that we had available were like the Oculus DK2, which was like their second developer headset. The Vive, HTC Vive was just announced. The Oculus Rift was just announced. And like, but somewhere between 2015, 2016 is when we started getting these more powerful headsets. But these headsets had to be hooked up to a gaming PC that was custom built, that had a certain like graphics card and certain RAM. And that's just to get like the headset functional. You would have sensors that you would have to calibrate and put around, because like as you're editing this content, you're constantly putting on the headset being like, oh, do all the stitch lines look good and all of that stuff. So like from a hardware perspective, it was insane. I don't know what we were all thinking. Like literally, if you go back to any VR conference or panel happening around that time, we were all very, very bullish on the mass adoption of VR by 2020. We were incredibly off, which is really funny. But for what I was doing, especially since a lot of it was 360 videos that we were actually capturing with multiple cameras, like the challenges that we were facing was making sure we had the right camera rig, depending on what we were trying to shoot. And like to prep for that, there would be times where, we're picking up 4 or 5 mirrorless Sony cameras and literally taking them apart and building like these custom cameras using the sensor. And like it was insane. Like I was basically just like following along with everyone else, like taking apart cameras and whatnot. But like the camera tech was difficult. The stitching technology was also very difficult, because you have to imagine let's say we're capturing from at least 7 different camera angles, right? Because you have to have coverage of everything for a 360 video. We would have, at that time, where the tech is we would have to manually take all of those video files, sync them so that they were all in perfect sync, and then manually stitch them. So that was going through being like, hey, this edge from camera 2 matches perfectly with this single edge from camera 3. And you're like setting, hundreds and hundreds of stitch points in order to get it to be a seamless 360 video. So I would say the biggest challenges were tech. And at the same time, you actually had a lot of Web 2 companies coming in being like, hey, we want to make an immersive experience for this conference that we're doing. We saw, like, I would say that was a massive driver of, it was a massive driver of like commercial production. And quite frankly, where a lot of budget for pieces was coming from. It was coming from these big Web 2 companies that wanted to have some sort of story or activation at whatever, physical in real life event that they were doing. And so even with, a lot of money in the world, like some of these budgets were anywhere from 250 grand upwards of several million. The amount of troubleshooting for tech that we would have to do was insane within itself. And then if you were building in a game engine, Unity was the primary one that we utilized, because Unreal was like pretty heavy back then, like even more problems. And you needed to be prepared to essentially have like a team of 15 to 20 people basically working on building out the models, making sure it's optimized for the headset, making sure it actually plays, because it's really easy to build beautiful, beautiful 360 environments, right? But it's another thing when you have to compress it down into something that's going to play on a headset for the Rift connected to a PC, or literally on a mobile phone. For the Samsung Gear. I don't know if you guys remember, but Samsung had like this 2-year period where you could take like their little Samsung Galaxy and stick it into a Samsung headset to watch 360 videos. And that was, I would say, one of the main headsets that was utilized back then.
Yeah, you remind me of the Google Cardboard back then, and it was very like DIY. And I see how we could draw parallels with the early stages of Web3 as well. A lot of things where you have to learn like how to bridge this, how to set up a crypto wallet, and stuff like that. So you mentioned a lot of different projects, right? So are there any VR projects that you're really proud of or super unforgettable that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, this one's always a tough one because there were quite a few that were worked on. But I would say, the first one that I think I did where I finally felt really creative, or I really felt confident in myself and my creative capabilities, was this music video we did with this musician named Banks. And it was a 2-part 360 experience. And essentially, we took all of her songs from previous albums and her new up and coming album, and we crafted this immersive narrative that basically, like, the idea was to drop you into her brain and into her world as a creator, but still experiencing her art, right? So she's a big poet. And so we overlaid a lot of her poetry with the actual vocals. And that was really, really fun because like no one had ever tried to do a creative music video like this before. And that you can see here from the screen, the tech was still fairly rough. And funny enough, this opening shot, so many people were like, Jen, how did you do this? And I'm like, we got on set and we told everyone to freeze, and the only person that was able to move was her. And like they were all like mind blown by like the practicality of that, because they thought we like pen tooled her in and all of that stuff. So that was pretty funny. And then the second one, I think one thing that I've realized about myself is I'm very impact driven, and any like work that I can do that has some sort of social impact is very, very important to me. So this one was more recent, actually. It was a little bit before the pandemic, but essentially with Google and United Women, we were able to go and create this like 180 doc series. It's basically spotlighting some of the most incredible like female activists in the world and globally. And so there was this one woman who's a chief of a village in Africa who annulled over 3,000 child marriages, and like has basically put in infrastructure in place to make sure these kids are finishing their education and not just being married off when they're like 7 or 8, because that's what happens there. Another one was Lydia Chuco, who is an incredible journalist from Mexico, who has basically uncovered human trafficking rings. And so it's like capturing all of these stories was something I never thought I'd be able to do, and getting to meet and spend so much time with these incredible women, again, was a mind-blowing experience. And then I would say like the third one, and this I would say probably ties in the most with my Web3 experience. Back in like 2019, I think we started working on it in 2018. A friend of mine, her name is Taryn Southern. She was one of the first YouTubers, literally when like YouTube first came out and did a big thing. And she's actually the one who introduced me to crypto via Ethereum many years ago. But she was like, hey, Jen, like, there's this really cool thing, you should look into it. It's Ethereum, there's blockchain technology, everything's available on a public ledger. Also, like, I'm tinkering around with this idea of creating music utilizing AI and like doing it with a group of people in a decentralized way. And we should make music videos for the songs that get created through this process. And I was like, okay, that sounds really cool. And we knew we wanted it to be built in a 360 like game engine real-time environment. And so that was a tough project, mostly because the budget for it was incredibly small. And, we had a couple of people on the post-production side, but like basically once we were getting these scenes out from the designers who built these 360 worlds, we were having such a hard time rendering it into like this video that you see playing where, there's camera movement and all of this stuff. And I actually had to call up a friend of mine who had a VR production studio, and I'd be like, hey, I'm trying to render out this scene and my like computer is just not cutting it. And I would like drive an hour out into the valley and like work out of there for the rest of the day and like utilize their servers and their render farms to help me render out like 30-second clips at a time. But yeah, this one, it was particularly interesting because I think it's like, to your point, a lot of people are metaverse now, metaverse today, and it's 2023. This is something that we were looking at, in 2018, 2019, when we put the pieces out of like, how can we build immersive worlds for people to interact and engage with. There's that.
I think it's really interesting because AI is now the hype, right? The trends changes really fast. Last year was like immersive world, and the year before NFTs, and now we have AI. But everything is kind of like comes in a circle, right? Basically, like this video, it was made like a few years ago, and it has everything encompassing it. So I think it's really cool. So out of curiosity, have you had any chance to merge your interest in Web3 with your VR experiences? Like I know in the past you co-founded Women in AR VR to help support women and underrepresented groups, right? So in the emerging Web3 space, have you thought of doing something similar?
I have. And look, the way I kind of look at it was like when I came into VR, it was something that was like very native and easy for me to understand. And it felt like something that I could fully take control of. It's very easy when you're in a creative emerging tech industry and you're a creative to have very concrete opinions about like, what are the implications for the rest of the space? Like, how can we build together? Like, it's much easier to like, assert yourself in that way. And given that I was in so early, it was very, very easy to create such a robust and incredible community. I think like when I look at doing it for Web3, because there's definitely like, I think, how do I say this? There are a lot of underrepresented groups within Web3 that aren't the majority yet and that don't really fully have a platform. And the way that I approached women in VR and AR was with the goal of we should never have to have a group called this, right? It was more like, how can we build diversity, equality, and inclusion at the basis and foundation of our industry? So that way there's not, oh, women in VR panel, and it's like 4 women as panelists, but it's more like, why don't you just have diverse speakers to begin with? And like, if you're telling me that there's not female executives in Web3, then I know you're absolutely wrong, because there are plenty. I'm friends with plenty of them. And so I think more right now, like when I look about doing something like that in Web3, like I actually see that there are already initiatives established, and it's just more or less being an active participant in that. And then like there are things that you can do to elevate like fellow females or fellow underrepresented groups by making sure opportunities are also given to them. So it's like one of those things that I've thought about it, I've looked at it. It's something that I think I'm definitely still formulating my thoughts on how to go about doing in the most effective manner. So that's kind of on like the community building side, and I would say like the impact social side of things, right? And then on like the creative side, in terms of NFTs and all of that stuff, it's pretty interesting. So I started my journey in Web3 more on the DeFi side of things. I saw what NFTs were and I kind of thought it was cool. I'm like, oh, it's this JPEG that people are trading for insane amounts of money. And ultimately, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't fully get it. I didn't fully understand NFTs. And then a couple of months actually before I joined Paraspace, I started, poking around, and I was like, a lot of folks are talking about this. Oh, I think Azuki art's really cool. Like that really hits home with like my love for anime and more art along that style. And then I found a couple of smaller NFT projects and just like threw some money at it, and like for a week was just like fully immersed in that community, doing Twitter spaces all the time, like talking to folks, seeing how they talked about NFTs, and like a light bulb just went on in my head. And I was like, okay, like I get it. Like the community aspect of NFTs is so, so dope. It is like crazy to see all of these people come together and like we're all bullish on this art. Like that's really, really cool. And to be able to nerd out about art and color palettes and all of that stuff with some of those folks was really awesome. And then the other half of it, actually, the other light bulb didn't really flip for me until I met Yubo, who's the CEO and one of the founders of Paraspace. And he basically came to me and was like, Jen, I want to build a universal lending protocol. Like, here's the vision. And like, as we distilled that down more, and I saw how NFTs played a bigger part in that, and like, ultimately, as more and more assets move on chain, given that majority of assets in our life are currently non-fungible, pretty safe to assume that as these assets come on chain, they're going to be coming on chain in the form of NFTs. And so Yubo really breaking down what Paraspace did made me see, I'm like, this is not just about JPEGs. This is about how can we redefine the financial system that we interact with every day to make it more equitable, to make it more accessible, and to make it more fair for everyone, right? And the reality is right now in Web3, we need to build out that infrastructure.
So I think that's really interesting. You having that conversation with Yubo, and why did you decide to transition from a VR immersive director and producer into a totally different industry, like as a marketing director in a NFT lending protocol?
Yeah, so it's like a couple of things, right? Like I think 2020 kind of hit us all by like we were all caught off guard by 2020. And for me, I had several VR shoots lined up that once the pandemic came, they all got canceled. And thankfully, given my experience in VR, I've had experience putting together campaigns both on like the client side of things as well as the agency side of things. And I kind of like had to take a moment to take a step back and go, is directing really what I want to do with the rest of my life? Is that really what's driving me right now? And it was really hard for me to come to this decision, and it took a lot of time, but I ultimately realized I'm at a point in my life now where I really need to lean into my strengths. And like I was finding more or less that the work that I was enjoying was actually like within tech startups, being able to be a part of a team that was actually building something that I considered impactful. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, so like I know my strengths are, I'm really good from getting from point A to point B, even if there's like a million obstacles in between. Like I have a very unique skill set in the sense that like I'm now embracing the title of like a Swiss Army knife, because I'm self-taught in a lot of things. And so it's like, how can I leverage the skill set that I've built over, the course of my entire life and actually channel that into the work that I do? And so ultimately, it was one of those things that realized that as much as I love creative work and storytelling, there's so many mediums and formats for me to do that within. It doesn't just have to be VR. It doesn't just have to be film. And I think like brand storytelling is particularly interesting. And I think like, especially within the Web3 space, there's a different way and a new approach of going about like, how do you build a brand? How do you build brand values, a brand identity? And like, how do you tell the story of a protocol in its community, right? And so that aspect was all very interesting to me as well. And ultimately, I think like the thing that really pushed me over the top is like on one hand, I'm having this existential crisis / awakening, but on the other hand, I'm very firmly rooted in the fact that I know that I wanted to go and build something that I felt mattered. Again, this goes back to like the social impact, and impact work has always been really important throughout my life, which is why like I started Women in VR AR. It's why I really loved doing the piece for, Google and the United Women. And so it was always like, how can I do something that I feel like will actually help make the world a better place, or help make at least a few people's lives easier? And so when Yuval kind of laid out the big vision of like NFT will redefine finance, that was something that I immediately understood. And I'm all like, this is a small team. I'm going to get to wear a lot of hats, which is great at the beginning, but it's like I get to be a part of something and build something that I think, knock on wood, is going to carry its value for decades to come. And I think it's going to be a huge foundational part of wherever, decentralized finance goes in the next 10, 20 years.
So as the marketing director, right, here's the time to show your project. Like this show is not sponsored, guys, but here's the time to use a one-liner to show Paraspace, or just to talk about what is Paraspace. Because I think NFT finance is a relatively new concept, right? NFT is also really relatively new concept. So what is NFT finance? What are you guys doing at Paraspace?
Yeah, I think if I had one sentence to shell, it's basically we want to unlock liquidity for all digital assets. And so that means, if you have NFTs and you don't want to sell them because this is your, digital identity, but it's an NFT that's worth, 100, 200 grand, it'd be really nice if you could access liquidity from that NFT without having to sell it. And like, imagine when your home is now on chain as an NFT. It'd be really nice to be able to get a loan against your home without having to go into the bank and do like that whole process. And so like the idea for us is like, how do we build a scalable infrastructure that will enable this like universal lending and this universal liquidity to be tapped into for these digital assets?
I can already hear some alpha down the line. It's not just profile pic, but there's a lot of applications like when done right as well. So I personally, one of the reasons why Paraspace came up on my radar is that I believe that you guys found a niche, which is ape staking. And then you guys fully utilize that. You utilize NFT finance, and you guys were like the first to market. You found your niche, and you were able to grow exponentially, which I think is super cool. But I will leave that for another interview with Yuval to share about that experience. But one of the things that I really wanted to ask you is that recently this protocol was hacked by a white hat hacker. So it was very lucky for the protocol to not suffer any losses and to gain a really valuable lesson. And one thing that I really appreciate what you guys are doing, because if you look at on-chain data at DeFi Llama, this is when the protocol was hacked by the white hat hacker, right? So this is just like a week ago or so, like 2 weeks ago. But right now, the total value locked, it didn't go down even though you guys unlocked the protocol. Because what you guys did was a damage control, freeze the protocol, just to find out what's happening and stuff like that. But even right now, when it was unlocked, you still even have this upward movement. It means people are putting money inside, right? Same for lending. And also, ape staking is pretty much steady. So I just want to ask you, like, from this experience, of course you can share a little bit more background if you want, but what did you guys do right? It has to be something that you guys have done right to see this result.
Oh man, so this was a pretty crazy thing that happened. So this year at FTLA, we were having a fairly large presence in terms of side events. I think in total, we had our name on about 4 side events, with 2 of those events that we were co-hosting ourselves. And the first event was going to be on Friday, and the protocol white hat hack happened like, I basically got the call Thursday night at like 11 p.m. or it was somewhere around there. All I know is it was Thursday night. I was literally just about to like close my laptop and like head up to bed and be like, all right, here we go, NFTLA. I get a call and I immediately like hop on Slack, join the huddles, and it was crazy. The speed in which things were moving and evolving was pretty insane. And immediately the first thing that came up was, does the community know about this? Okay, we need to let the community know. Is the protocol frozen? Okay, majority of the protocol is frozen, but we still need to freeze a few more functions. We need to let the community know. And then the next thought was, we need to assess what's actually been lost and the actual damages. And that took us quite a bit of time, because the way the white hat, or I guess the way the exploit happened, was there's a lot of convoluted transactions where, you know, you're supplying and then you're borrowing and then you're swapping and then you're supplying, borrowing. And so it was like, it took us a second to track. But really, I think the response from the community really boils down to the internal ethos we have as a team at Paraspace, where like, this is even within our branding, right? When you look at like our core brand identity and like our protocol identity, and you think about the pillars that might exist there, it's accessibility, it's community, it's innovation, it's transparency. Those are just some of the few. And we took what happened as, like you said, we were very lucky, right? Very, very lucky that it was a white hat that was able to rescue the funds, and that ultimately at the end of the day, no consumer funds or assets were lost. However, the way we treated this internally was as if we lost everything, right? Like, we were essentially given a second chance, and it was a very humbling experience of like, yo, like, if you guys aren't more proactive about securing the protocol once you deploy code beyond just getting stuff audited, like, that could spell trouble down the line. And so we took that as a sign, and basically we shut down the protocol for a week. We took time to not only patch and have our security patches extensively reviewed with partners, we also started to develop basically security enhancements. The time lock withdrawal enhancement is one of them. We had other enhancements that we wanted to develop, but basically protocol shuts down for a week. No one can access their assets. And the way we structured the relaunch of the protocol, once we had a clear plan in place, it was basically, we're going to do a phased reopening. We're going to give people access to as many features and functions as we can until we're done with the time lock security enhancement, having that audited, and any like capital outflow actions we will launch with last, to make sure we're putting it live with the security enhancement that would prevent the white hat exploit from ever happening. So basically what we did from there, once that high level plan was laid out, it was making sure that we were communicating with our community online and in person every single day. Like, if you go through our Twitter or our Discord, during the time that the protocol was frozen, you would see there were not only daily updates, but we did AMAs every other day, whether, you know, 7 people showed up or whether 30 people showed up. It didn't matter to us. It was really important for us to make sure that we had a space that anyone could come and join and ask us anything. So I think, like, in terms of that, on the comm side of things, I think that's what really helped instill trust. Like, you know, we've been seeing a lot of exploits recently, and you kind of go look at how are these other protocols handling it, and it's like, there's an initial announcement, everything's frozen, and then that's it. You know, you have to like dig into their Discord to find everything. Whereas for us, we wanted to take a different approach of like, we need to be as transparent as possible during this entire process. And I think like that really resonated with the community, mostly because I think it's a huge part of the Web3 ethos. You know, we're all here because we believe in this decentralized ledger where everything is publicly available. We're here because we believe in the spirit of transparency, right? So that, like, that's on one end. And then obviously for us, it was making sure, like, what can we do to ensure users want to stay outside of like having, you know, a good product. And it was like, okay, well, we need to make sure that everyone who couldn't access their funds during this time is rewarded. We are also going to do like fast track our incentive program, as well as like the starting to plan our governance token. So that way we can reward the people that were here with us during the toughest time, right? long term, and like hopefully those are the folks that get the most rights and voting rights over the protocol. So it's been like a lot of moving parts, but I think it's like everything that we do, we really do with the community first in mind. Even like this community reward NFT that we're giving away, it wasn't just like we're going to go to Fiverr and commission some random NFT art that we think is cool. It was like there are a ton of insane creators in this space, and a lot of people with incredible talent. So we actually reached out to community artists, and then it was like we gave them the same prompt, and then it was like, hey guys, like we're gonna let the community vote on which like art direction they want to go in. And so like finding things like that where you're able to engage the community with this process of like rebuilding and strengthening the protocol, I think is really key. Like we say it all the time, like we're here to build alongside of our community. And I think for us, just making sure that we actually execute on that and we don't just say it is ultimately what is allowing for us to actually hit all-time highs on our platform right now. I don't really know how else to say it, but it's like one of those things that I think Paraspace users probably feel more like they're part of this protocol than they would other protocols, just because of like how we approach our community and how we engage with them. Also, like with regards to NFTLA, I just want to say, as crazy as it was being basically online and accessible 24/7, it was insanely, like we are so grateful that we still had time to meet with our community members and users in person at some of these events. Even though like, you know, we all took turns. Like sometimes I'd be in an event corner and I would be working, and you know, it was a crazy time, and we're just very, very grateful for all the support that we've gotten thus far, is what I can say.
What I really appreciate the most is accountability. You guys are all docs, and like it's not something that you always see with regards to a DeFi protocol. Like I have to say this again. One of the reasons why I explored more about Paraspace, this is not a show, is I saw your video explaining how the protocol works, how there was a mismatch in the ape staking and so on. Like that is actually very different from what I've seen in other protocols. In other protocols, they might get like a Fiverr and then an anonymous voice, voice overing a video, but you're not afraid to preach your protocol, right? You're not afraid to let yourself out, especially like this is a really interesting story, or a case if you will, in the Web3 space where a protocol was hacked, but because of right communication, a very strong community, I have to say, you guys are now hitting all-time high even after you were hacked, even if you're opening up your protocol. So I think you guys are definitely doing something right. And I really appreciate you sharing it from a communication standpoint, and also from your own standpoint, because throughout the whole interview I can see that you have a passion. You have a passion to really build something. You're not here just to like make money through DeFi and just go, right? Because money, like, I think one of the things about the space is not a lack of liquidity, but it's more about a lack of transparency or a lack of accountability. But you guys have shouldered that accountability, and I think the community knows that they're in good hands, and therefore you have this result.
I mean that's like the best outcome we could have hoped for, right? Because I think like so often in this space you're used to basically coming across founders that are like, trust me bro, I got you.
Deploying steady lads.
yeah Steady lads, capital coming in. Like, oh god. And I think like it's particularly interesting because like we're a protocol, and majority of the projects I would say in this space are not technically protocols. They're PFP projects or they're NFT projects. And so I think like for us it's one of those things that it's like, these are our smart contracts, these are our users. Like this is for sure at the end of the day our fault. Like yes, we get everything audited, but like we actually had a space the other day with BlockSec, which is now one of our strategic security partners, and they're part of our security council to advise us on all future security related matters. But like something that Andy, the founder, said was like, security doesn't stop after you get your audits. Like there are people that are constantly going to be trying to attack your smart contracts, even if they are audited. There has to be proactive solutions and measures. And like, that's why, we're now building like a real-time threat detection system for the Paraspace protocol. And so I think it's one of those things that, I hope that we are people, because we are people at the end of the day, but it's like, I hope when people see the folks that are behind Paraspace and the team that's behind Paraspace, it's like, we put our money where our mouth is. And if we don't, like, please call us out, please hold us accountable. If we said we're going to do something and we didn't do it, you have every right to be like, hey guys, what the fuck is going on? And like, that's just how we operate. And I think like, I like to say, I'm like, Paraspace is built differently, but I mean, I'm sure all protocols like to say that about themselves, but I really feel it here.
Yeah. I was actually gonna follow up with a question, like at that moment, because this is a kind of like a personal interview, right? It's not just only about Paraspace. As someone like yourself, when the protocol was hacked, right, and you see how everything was unfolding, and as someone who's in charge of like communications and stuff like that, and you see how, like, to a certain extent, the hacker was kind of childish. I'm not sure if you noticed, but they basically had a message, on-chain message, asking the white hat hacker to refund him because he basically messed up his gas setting, right?
Yeah.
When you see this, right, sometimes people tend to forget that the money being staked in a protocol are hard-earned money from the users themselves, and they kind of treat it as a game. But the way that you guys do it, like the way how serious that you guys took it, is something that I really respect. But from a personal perspective, when you see the whole thing, what do you think? Like, what is the biggest takeaway for you personally?
It's funny. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in my career, and this was actually while I was in VR, came from this older woman who is incredibly experienced in the entertainment industry, like legacy creator, very well respected creator, all of that stuff. And I asked her, I actually forgot like what existential crisis I was going through then, but I was asking her for advice, and she's like, Jen, you're too worried about doing things right. She's like, you need to not worry about doing things right, worry about doing them honestly. And like, it's an interesting piece of advice, right? Because what is right and wrong? And it's definitely something that we all kind of define by our own ways, but like, it just really hit with me. And I think like seeing all of this happen and unfold, and really like being in the position that I'm in, where it's like, okay, like I am now in charge of making sure that the community knows everything that's going on, and like I have to like kind of like orchestrate like this online as well as the events that are happening in person. And I think for me, and just the thought process the whole entire time was like, just be honest, be authentic. And like at the end of the day, if we really feel like we did everything that we could, that's all we can do. And I think that's why, you saw I wouldn't even consider it over the top. Like, everyone on the Paraspace team, we also are users of the platform. I think that's one of the really cool things. It's not because we have to be users of the platform, but it's because like, it's so cool and there's a ton of benefits. And so it's like, step aside from, you work at the protocol, and it's like, put yourself in a user's shoe. Like, what would you expect to see if you knew that your money either almost got lost or you couldn't access your money for a week? Like, how would you want someone to handle that? And so like taking the step back, it's kind of like, I just look at it all and I'm just like, oh, thank God. Like, long story short, it's like, it's a massive relief that nothing was lost. And I think it's just like really a testament to, build transparently and be honest, open, and make sure everything you're putting out there is authentic. I feel like there might have been a few people who would have tried to like twist this story in a different way, and it's like, no, like we just need to tell people what we're doing, and that's it, you know.
I think this signals a very good conclusion to our interview, and it is definitely very insightful and rewarding. So thank you so much for being here, Jen. Guys, if you're watching this, if you like the content, remember to like and retweet or share this on YouTube, whatever. Jen's social media and Paraspace social media is down in the description box below, so feel free to like and show some support or just engage them and see if you like the community, like what Jen has been saying. So thank you so much, Jen, and yeah, looking forward to see what you guys build.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you guys.
Bye.